"Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins." Night had already settled over the Temerian borderlands, laying a cool, whispering hush upon the marshes and half-abandoned villages scattered between them. Geralt of Rivia rode along a narrow track, his mare's hooves muffled by damp earth. The air smelled of wood smoke, wet reeds, and something else, something faintly sour like old blood left too long in the open. It was a scent a witcher never ignored. Roach flicked an ear. Geralt's gloved hand drifted toward the hilt of his sword, though he did not draw. Not yet. He had been on the road for 2 days, following rumors of a creature lurking near the ruins of Castle Heroth. At first they had sounded like ordinary peasant fright, shadows moving at night, livestock torn apart, a child missing. But then the alderman from a nearby hamlet sent word that the beast had taken to attacking armed soldiers as well, Temerians and Redanians alike. That alone spoke of danger. A monster that feared neither steel nor patrols was a monster worth investigating. Ahead, dim lantern light glimmered between crooked cottages. The village was small, scarcely a dozen homes huddled beneath slant-roofed barns. Yet even from a distance Geralt sensed the unease. No laughter, no movement, only shutters closed tight and torches burning low. A village wrapped in its blanket of fear. He guided Roach toward the square, where a single lantern swayed from a post, and an elderly man waited, stooped but stubbornly awake. His face appeared carved from worn oak, all lines and hollows, and his hands trembled slightly as he bowed. "You're the Witcher," the man whispered, voice rasping with relief. "Thank the gods. I am Bram Alderman here. We sent for you days ago." "I came as soon as I could," Geralt said, dismounting. "Tell me what you know." Bram glanced over his shoulder, as though expecting something to rise from the dark at the very mention of it. "The killings began 3 weeks past. At first we thought it wolves." He was strong, near-grown. Wolves don't take boys like him, nor soldiers in full kit. But this thing did. Geralt folded his arms. "Describe it." "We have not seen it clearly, only its shape when it moves. Some claim it crawls, others swear it runs upright. All agree on the claws, the tearing." Bram shuddered. "Whatever it is, it comes from the direction of Castle Heroth. No one goes near the ruins anymore." Geralt nodded. Ruins, old noble family, strange killings, an ordinary pattern for extraordinary trouble. "Anyone living near the castle still?" "Only ghosts," Bram muttered. "The Hroth line died out years ago. The last lady of the house, Morena, was said to dabble in strange rites after losing her child. Folk whispered, but none dared confront her. When she vanished, some believed she'd taken her own life. Others feared something worse." Geralt felt the air grow colder, though the breeze had not changed. "And you want this creature dealt with?" "Aye? We have coin. Not much, but... Witcher, this beast is bleeding us dry. We beg you, end it." Geralt rested a hand on Bram's shoulder, steadying the trembling man. "I'll investigate first. I don't swing a sword blindly." "Aye, of course. Whatever you need, food, shelter, a place for your horse. Ask and it's yours." Geralt followed Bram to a stable beside the tavern where Roach settled in with a snort. The village was so still that even the creak of the stable door seemed too loud. No music from the tavern, no arguing drunkards, no chatter. Silence ruled here, broken only by the wind through loose boards. Inside the tavern, Geralt ate a simple stew and listened to the murmurs of a few villagers bold enough to speak while he sat among them. Their stories were tangled with fear but consistent. The creature came at night, attacked swiftly, and vanished just as quickly. It never lingered, never fed fully, as though killing was purpose enough. When he finished the meal, clouds parted, revealing a pale wash of moonlight spreading across the land. The path toward Castle Hroth wound like a scar into the hills, swallowed by darkness farther on. He breathed deep, that sour scent again, blood and something else beneath it, something restless. The wind shifted. A faint cry, thin as a dying breath, drifted from the northern fields. Geralt's hand found the hilt of his steel sword, not silver, steel for the things that still clung to a shred of humanity. He moved without sound, boots ghosting over the ground, eyes narrowed as he followed the cry. It came again, sharper this time, carrying notes of both pain and terror. Beyond the last cottage, something shifted in the tall grass. A hunched silhouette, pale and small, crawling with unnatural speed. Geralt quickened his pace. The shape turned its head. Two glimmering eyes met his, not bestial, not fully, eyes of a child twisted by something foul. Then it fled toward the castle ruins, swift as a startled deer. Geralt watched it vanish into the dark, breath steady. A striga would have attacked, a ghoul would have fed, a wraith would have screamed. But this thing, it hesitated, and that hesitation would change everything. Dawn crept slowly over the borderlands, painting the sky in faint hues of ember and rose, yet the warmth of morning did little to ease the chill that had settled in Geralt's bones after the night's encounter. He had returned to the tavern only when the creature's trail grew too faint to follow in darkness. Now, as the village stirred with weary caution, he prepared to visit the ruins of Castle Hroth, though the memory of those glimmering eyes lingered like frost upon his thoughts. Bram awaited him outside, clutching a cloak around his thin shoulders. "Witcher," he said, voice rough from sleeplessness. "Did you see aught last night?" "I saw something," Geralt replied. "Small, fast, humanoid. It fled before I could approach." Bram paled. "Then it hunts still." Instead, he saddled Roach, secured his weapons, and began the trek toward Castle Hroth. The villagers watched him leave, hope and dread mingling in their eyes, as if the Witcher's departure might stir the creature from hiding. The path to the ruins wound through a stretch of gnarled oaks, their branches interlaced overhead like the ribs of an ancient beast. The forest floor was soft with fallen leaves, the air thick with the scent of damp bark. Geralt moved quietly, senses alert. Birds sang fitfully, never for long, as though fearful of disturbing the shadows. He found signs soon enough, a trail of faint scratches on a tree trunk, spaced too widely for any animal that crawled. Fresh footprints, small, bare, and strangely deep, pressed into the mud along the path. The creature had passed through only hours before. Roach snorted uneasily as the castle's silhouette rose above the tree line. Castle Hroth had once been a proud structure with twin towers and a commanding view of the valley. Now it sagged under decades of decay. Ivy strangled the walls, stones lay scattered like bones, and the wooden gates hung from rusted hinges. Geralt dismounted and led Roach to a sheltered corner beneath a leaning archway. Sunlight filtered through broken battlements, casting pale strips across the courtyard beyond. All was still, too still. Geralt drew his silver blade, not because he expected wraiths, but because it was the quieter of his two swords. He stepped into the courtyard and paused, letting the air settle around him. Then he smelled it. Old sorrow, clinging like smoke, and beneath it the same sour trace from the night before. He advanced carefully through the rubble until he reached what remained of the keep's grand hall. A portion of the roof had collapsed, letting sunlight spill across the stone floor. The hall was empty save for toppled columns and a weathered tapestry hanging by a single thread, its faded embroidery. He crouched, touched the floor, and found dried tracks. Small, human, not older than a child of 8 or 9, yet their spacing was wrong, uneven, as though the creature walked upright only sometimes. A faint sound echoed from deeper within the ruins, a soft scraping, almost timid. Geralt rose, sword ready. A figure slipped from the shadows. A woman, slender and pale, her dark hair falling loose around a face lined with grief. Her dress, once fine, bore the marks of long wear, torn hem, fraying sleeves, dust-smeared fabric. She watched the Witcher with an expression of wary recognition, as though she had been expecting him. "You should not be here," she murmured. Her voice trembled like a candle in a draught. "Leave this place, leave him in peace." Geralt studied her, every sense sharpened. "Lady Morena." She flinched. "No one has spoken that name in years. The villagers said you vanished. I came here," she said softly, "to mourn my son." Geralt stepped closer, though he kept his blade angled between them. "Your son died years ago." Her eyes glistened. A mother's grief does not die so easily. The sour scent deepened, swirling around her like a veil. Geralt's pulse slowed, measured. "What did you do, Morena?" Her lips parted, then trembled shut. She wrapped her arms around herself, a fragile shield against his gaze. "I sought to undo what fate had taken. I turned to forbidden rites. I begged the spirits of the land to return him to me. But the ritual went wrong. Something answered, something that should not have. And now there is a creature roaming the borderlands," Geralt said, her voice cracked. "He is my son." "No," Geralt said, calm but firm. "He is not." Morena's grief twisted into fierce, desperate anger. "You do not understand. He remembers me. He comes here at dawn to hide. He is afraid of the villagers. They hunted him before. He was only defending himself." "How often does he come?" "Every morning, before sunrise." She looked toward a darkened stairwell. He should have returned by now. The Witcher felt a prickle of unease. The creature had fled toward the ruins last night, but the trail he followed had ended near the outer wall. Had something else found it, or was it watching now, listening? "Show me where you performed the ritual," he said. Morena hesitated. "If I do, you will judge me. All Witchers do." Geralt sheathed his blade, though he'd not relax. "Judgment isn't my trade. Curses are." Her shoulders sagged. She nodded and led him toward a chamber deep beneath the castle. The air cooled as they descended the steps, each footfall echoing through stone corridors worn by time. At the bottom lay a crypt, small, circular, its walls etched with symbols meant to soothe the dead. Only these symbols had been altered, redrawn, twisted. Geralt's jaw tightened. This was no simple mourning rite. It bore the shapes of necromancy, though clumsy and incomplete. In the center of the room lay a small stone coffin. Its lid was cracked open. Morena sank to her knees beside it. "I only wanted one more moment," she whispered. "One chance to hold him again." Geralt approached the coffin and looked inside. Claw marks gouged the stone. The interior was empty. Before he could speak, a distant cry echoed through the halls above, a cry full of fear and something else, recognition. Morena gasped. "He's back!" Geralt drew steel and sprinted up the stairs, the woman close behind him. Light burst into the corridor as they emerged into the ruins once more. The cry came again, clearer now, leading toward the courtyard. Geralt reached the archway and froze. The creature stood there, hunched and trembling beneath the rising sun. Its skin was pale as chalk, its limbs thin but sinewy, fingers tipped with sharp, uneven claws. Yet its face still bore the faint outline of a child's features. Haunting, it looked at Morena, and she whispered, tears falling freely, "My son." For a long heartbeat, the ruins held their breath. Dust hung motionless in a shaft of sunlight, and the creature, small, twisted, trembling, stared at the woman who had once been its mother, its eyes, pale and glimmering like frost beneath moonlight, softened at the sight of her. A low whimper rose from its throat, wavering and unsure, like a child waking from a nightmare. Morena took a hesitant step forward. "Do not fear," she murmured, her voice quivering with fragile hope. "I am here now. You are safe." Geralt did not move. He watched the creature's posture, the tension in its limbs, the twitching of its claws. It recognized her, that much was clear, but recognition was not the same as reason, and reason was the first thing these half-born abominations lost. The creature lifted its head slightly, sniffing at the air. A faint sound escaped it, too warped to be a word, yet too deliberate to be mere instinct. Morena's breath caught. She knelt, arms outstretched as though expecting a child to rush into them, not a beast molded by miscast sorcery. "Come to me," she whispered. "Please." Geralt's voice cut through the stillness, low and measured. "Do not approach it." Morena flinched, as though struck. "He would never harm me. He knows me. He remembers." Her eyes shone with desperate conviction. "You saw how he looked at me." "I saw hesitation," Geralt replied. "That is not memory, not in the way you believe, and hesitation is dangerous." The creature shifted its weight. A growl, a thin, tremulous rumble rose from its narrow chest. It glanced between Geralt and Morena, confusion clouding its unnatural gaze. Its fingers tightened, claws scraping softly against stone. Geralt steadied his blade, though he did not raise it. Morena stepped back, but she would not. "You promised not to judge me." I promised only to end a curse if I found one." The creature whined again. Its posture lowered, almost as if bowing, then trembled violently. A shudder ran through its entire form, an uncontrolled, spasming ripple that pulled its limbs inward like a dying spider. Morena cried out and rushed forward. This time Geralt moved faster. He caught her by the arm and pulled her back, just as the creature's claws slashed the air where her throat had been. The sound of its strike was sharp as tearing canvas. Morena stared in horror, not at the threat, but at the idea that her son could attempt such a blow. No, he didn't mean that," she whispered. Geralt stepped between her and the creature. "It is unstable. Its instincts are stronger than whatever memories remain." The creature screeched, a high, piercing wail that echoed through every corridor of the ruined castle. Birds exploded from the trees outside in a storm of wings. The beast shrank back, clutching its head with shaking claws, overwhelmed by its own cry. Geralt seized the moment, stepping forward, blade angled low. He intended only to push it away from Morena, to drive it back into the shadows, long enough to regain control of the situation. But the creature reacted with sudden, startling speed. It sprang to the side, leaping onto a toppled section of wall. Sunlight struck its skin, and it recoiled instinctively, slipping into the partial shade of a crumbling arch. Its breathing grew frantic, chest heaving, as though torn between two impulses, flight and the lingering pull toward Morena. Geralt watched it closely. It fears light. Not surprising. Morena wiped her tears with a shaking hand. He came to me in daylight, before, years ago, when he still looked. Her voice broke. He was afraid then, too. Geralt's expression hardened. You mean the first time he clawed out of the coffin? She said nothing, only turned her face away. The creature crouched, now its eyes fixed on Morena again, not with affection, but with something hungrier, more primal. Geralt recognized that look. He had seen it in cursed beings countless times. The confusion of fragmented memory twisted by the instinct to feed. He lowered his voice. Morena, the more you speak, the more you draw its attention. Move away, slowly. She tried to obey, stepping backward one trembling pace at a time. The creature watched her retreat, tense, conflicted. It made a soft, clicking sound, a pitiable attempt at speech. Then a distant noise broke the moment. The clatter of stones outside the ruins, followed by rough voices. Soldiers. A patrol, likely following the same rumors that had reached the village. The creature's head snapped toward the sound. It hissed, baring its teeth, and then it bolted. Geralt cursed under his breath and sprinted after it, leaping over broken stones, weaving between shattered columns. Morena followed, calling out desperately, but the beast was already scrambling up the outer wall with unsettling agility. It reached the top, paused for the briefest moment, and looked back at her. For a heartbeat, it almost appeared to hesitate again. Then a soldier's shout rang out, and the creature fled into the forest beyond the ruins, vanishing in a flicker of pale limbs and shadows. Geralt reached the base of the wall and stopped. He could chase it, but not blind, not while Morena stood behind him trembling, and not with armed men approaching who would not care for the difference between witcher, monster, or grieving mother. Footsteps drew closer. Soldiers emerged from the trees, armor dented and cloaks torn from long patrols. Their leader, a grizzled sergeant, pointed a gauntleted finger toward Geralt. "You there, witcher!" he barked. "We saw something run from the ruins. Looked like a child, but gods preserve us, it moved like a fiend. What in all the hells is loose here?" "Something that won't trouble you if you leave the ruins now." The sergeant snorted. "Not likely. Our orders are to hunt the beast that tore through 3 of our men last night." Behind Geralt, Morena gasped. Her fear, her guilt, clung to her like a shroud. The witcher stepped forward, blocking their advance. His voice dropped to a tone that brooked no argument. "You'll hunt nothing today. The creature is mine." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "And who's to say you can handle it alone?" Geralt's expression remained unreadable. "Experience." The soldiers hesitated. The ruins seemed to lean in around them, shadows stretching longer as if listening. At last the sergeant spat into the dirt. "Fine, witcher. Have your hunt. But if that thing kills again, the blame lies on your head." They retreated into the woods, muttering among themselves. When they were gone, Morena sank against the wall, shaking. "I never meant for any of this," she whispered. Geralt looked toward the forest, where the creature had vanished. The trail was faint, but he would follow it soon enough. for now he turned back to Morena. "Intent does not change what has been unleashed," he said. She wiped her face, eyes hollow. "Will you kill him?" Geralt did not answer immediately. The wind rustled through the ruined stones, carrying with it the fading echo of the creature's wail. At last he said, "I will end the curse." And whether ending the curse meant steel or something far more difficult remained a question the coming night would answer. The forest beyond the ruins was old, older than the settlers who had claimed these lands, older even than the Hroth family whose bones lay beneath their crumbling castle. Its trees rose like ancient sentinels, stretching toward the cloud-laden sky, with limbs gnarled by centuries of storms. Light filtered through the leaves in broken, trembling patches. Geralt followed the trail of the creature with silent precision, each step measured, each breath steady. The tracks were erratic. Sometimes the creature walked upright, other times it scraped along the ground as if using its hands. More than once, Geralt found deep gouges in the trunks, where claws had raked the bark in frantic confusion. It fled without aim, driven by instinct rather than thought. That alone made the hunt perilous. A monster that acted on reason could be predicted. One torn between fragments of memory and feral hunger was ever-changing, unpredictable as storm winds. The Witcher paused beside a narrow stream, crouching low. The mud held a fresh imprint, small, the size of a human child's foot, but pressed deep, the toes elongated. The creature had stopped here to drink, judging by the prints scattered at the water's edge. The disturbed reeds suggested it had trembled violently, spilling water as it tried and failed to calm itself. Geralt dipped 2 fingers into the stream. The water was cold, carrying the faint scent of iron. Upstream, something else stirred, a faint ripple disappearing as quickly as it appeared. Not the creature, something smaller, a hare perhaps. Roach would have balked at entering this part of the forest. Even Geralt felt the air thicken with unease. The trees stood closer here, their roots nodding across the path like serpents, frozen in struggle. He continued deeper, following the faint trail as it wound through a hollow choked with mist. The Witcher's medallion trembled, only slightly, but enough to warn him. Nothing here cast the sensation of a curse. No wraith, no specter lingering from old sorrows. Yet something hung in the air, a residue of the botched ritual that had wrested a soul from its rightful rest. Geralt knew that kind of magic. He had felt it in chambers where mothers had wailed over infants they could not save and had bargained with forces that should never be named. The trail let Geralt scaled it easily, boots finding sure footing between the cracks. At the top, he found a patch of flattened grass where the creature had curled to rest. Scratches marred the stone, desperate marks of an unsettled mind. More troubling, a second set of tracks mingled with them, lighter, belonging to a small animal, perhaps a fox. But there was no fox to be seen. Geralt exhaled slowly. The creature had begun feeding. That meant its hunger had grown stronger. He stood, brushing dirt from his gauntlets, and scanned the tree line. To the west lay the trail leading back toward the village. To the north, thicker woods, and beyond them, a road seldom traveled. If the creature headed north, it might cross paths with wandering merchants or lone travelers. Geralt could not allow that. He followed the trail northward, senses sharpened, moving like a shadow among shadows. The afternoon waned, the sun slipping behind the hills. Long fingers of dusk stretched across the forest floor. Wolves howled in the distance, their voices rising in uneasy chorus. They, too, felt the unnatural presence. Geralt reached the clearing just as the last traces of daylight fled, and there, beneath a leaning birch, crouched the creature. It gnawed upon a small carcass, its movements frantic, half-starved. The fox, what remained of it, lay limp in its grasp. The creature tore at it with a desperation that spoke of hunger far deeper than the flesh it consumed. Its shoulders shook with each bite as though battling its own instincts even while giving in to them. Geralt stepped forward. The creature froze, body rigid, claws sinking into the torn fur. Slowly it turned. Its eyes met his, pale, rimmed with red, gleaming with an emotion too fractured to name. Recognition flickered again, but so did fear, and beneath both the quiet simmer of rage. Geralt drew no weapon. Instead, he spoke softly. "You know me. Last night you saw, I meant no harm." The creature's lips parted. A sound escaped it, hoarse, quivering, almost like a question. Geralt took another step. "You remember her? Morena. She came to the ruins today." The creature tensed. The sound it uttered this time was clearer, strained by the effort to speak rather than snarl. Geralt stopped dead. Few cursed beings retained the capacity for words. True Strigas did not, nor wraiths twisted from the dead. But this creature was neither, not fully. A botched resurrection, a soul dragged from beyond and reattached to a body not meant to bear it. Some memories lingered, but each one tormented the creature like a shard of glass. He softened his tone. "If you remain here, the soldiers will catch your scent. They will not hesitate." The creature's breath quickened. It glanced toward the west, where the rustling of foliage suggested approaching men. The patrol had returned earlier than expected. Torches flickered between the trees, their glow drifting closer. The creature whimpered, backing away. "It's all right," Geralt murmured. "I can keep them from finding you. But you must come with me." The creature shook violently. Its claws sprang out. The hunger within it battled the faint threads of memory that still tied it to the world of the living. Voices pierced the growing darkness. "Spread out. Check the clearing." Geralt's medallion pulsed harder. The creature's panic surged. It darted away from him straight toward the ridge above the clearing. The Witcher lunged after it. "Wait!" The creature scrambled up the rocks, dislodging stones that clattered down the slope. Torches flared below as soldiers turned toward the sound. "There!" someone shouted. "It's close!" The creature reached the top of the ridge, panting, trembling, looking westward toward the voices, then eastward toward the deeper woods. Its indecision tore at it like a physical wound. Geralt climbed after it, swift and sure, but with a cry that carried both fury and fear, it leapt into the eastern shadows and vanished. Geralt reached the ridge's crest just as the soldiers burst into the clearing below. "Witcher," the sergeant called, torch raised. "Did you see it?" Geralt stood still, the forest wind tugging at his cloak. He looked down at the soldiers, their blades drawn, their faces pale in the torchlight. And he said only, "No." For the creature had fled into a part of the forest where even the bravest men dared not follow after dusk. And Geralt knew this chase was far from over. Night crept swiftly over the land as Geralt descended from the ridge, leaving the soldiers behind with their torches sputtering in the dark. The forest swallowed the last echoes of their shouts, replacing them with the steady murmur of wind moving through ancient branches. He paused, listening, not with his ears alone, but with every sharpened instinct. that had kept him alive through years of hunting things born from nightmare and misfortune. The creature's trail bent eastward into a region of the forest where growth thickened and paths twisted without rhythm. Old tales spoke of strange spirits dwelling there, harmless to most, hostile to some. But Geralt had no choice. The creature grew more unstable. With every hour it remained free. Its hunger would sharpen, its memories fade further, its instincts twist more violently. If it crossed paths with anyone else, the result would be grim. He set out once more, his steps light, cloak brushing quietly against brambles. The full moon, unveiled from drifting clouds, cast faint silver upon the leaves. Beneath its cold light, the forest seemed to breathe, slow, heavy breaths like those of a great beast slumbering just beyond sight. The trail was faint, but he found signs enough. A broken sapling bent unnaturally low, roots scratched raw where claws had raked them. Droplets of fox blood, each clue told him the creature moved not with purpose but with frantic desperation. It fled from soldiers, from light, from its own rising hunger. Geralt reached a narrow ravine where the earth sank into a shadowed gully. The creature had passed through it. He saw the marks of sliding feet, the scrapes of its claws along the rock. The ravine opened into a hollow where the moonlight did not dare to reach. Only the faint glimmer of his cat-like eyes let him see the outline of fallen trees and twisted roots. Then he heard it, a trembling sob, not the cry of a beast, but the thin, wavering sound of something trying, failing to remember what it once had been. Geralt tightened his grip on his steel blade. He did not draw it yet. He stepped into the hollow, letting silence settle before him like a cloak. The creature crouched beside a fallen log. Its thin shoulders shook with each breath, its pale fingers digging into the moss. Bits of fur and dried blood clung to its claws, yet its face, half turned toward him, wore an expression of anguish far too human to ignore. Geralt spoke quietly. "You cannot remain here." The creature whimpered. Moonlight revealed its eyes glistening, haunted by a pain it could not voice. It opened its mouth, and a sound escaped, broken, stuttering, like a word dragged through the grave. Ma. Geralt felt something cold settle in his chest. "She cannot help you anymore." The creature flinched violently. It pressed both hands to its skull, digging claws into its scalp, as though trying to tear away the voices inside. Its body convulsed, limbs twisting unnaturally. Geralt knew the signs. Its instincts were rising, consuming the last memories that tethered it to its former self. He stepped forward. "Listen to me. If you run from me again, the soldiers will find you. They will not hesitate, and He hesitated. Something he seldom allowed himself. "I may not be able to spare you." The creature lowered its hands but did not look at him. Instead, it stared past him, toward the dark, beyond the ravine, as though something waited there. Geralt turned his head just slightly, enough to listen without giving his back to the creature. Leaves rustled, not from wind. A figure emerged from the shadows. Morena, she stood barefoot, her dress torn by brambles, her hair wild as the forest itself. She had followed him all this way, quietly, stubbornly, driven by desperation stronger than fear. Her eyes were red from weeping, but her posture was unyielding. "Step away from him, Witcher," she whispered. "You have no right to end what I began." Geralt exhaled slowly. "You should not be here." "No mother abandons her child," Morena replied, voice trembling yet fierce. Not even death should force that choice. You are not helping him, Geralt said. You're worsening the curse. Morena moved closer to the creature, hands outstretched. He hears me, he knows me, he needs me. The creature's breathing changed, a harsh, eager rasp. It reached toward her with trembling claws. Geralt stepped between them instantly. Morena's face contorted in anguish. You cannot deny him this. I'm not denying him anything, Geralt said, but if he touches you now, he will kill you. She shook her head vehemently. He would never harm me. He already tried, Geralt replied. At the ruins, you simply refused to see it. Her resolve weakened, not fully, but enough for her hands to waver. I can save him. The ritual failed once, yes, but there must be a way to finish it, a way to restore him. There isn't. Geralt's voice carried the weight of truth, forged over years of witnessing the consequences of forbidden magic. Once the boundary between life and death is crossed improperly, the soul cannot return whole. What stands before you is not your son. It is what remains. Strangled, she sank to her knees, hands clutching the fabric of her dress. I only wanted him back. Just one chance to hold him again. The creature responded with a low moan, a pitiful, mournful sound that sliced through the quiet hollow. It crawled closer, hesitant, but drawn by her grief as much as by the fading remnants of memory. Geralt stepped back only slightly, enough to give the creature room, but not enough to let it reach her. He watched its movements carefully, every muscle poised. Its gaze flickered between them, conflict twisting its distorted features. Then something shifted. The creature's body stiffened, its nostrils flared. From the west, faint but approaching, came the distant clang of armor. The soldiers were returning. The creature snarled, fear sharpening into aggression. It lunged, not at Morena, not at Geralt, but toward the path leading back toward the ruins, toward the soldiers. Geralt sprinted after it, shouting, "A stop!" The creature, fueled by panic and hunger, paid no heed. It crashed through underbrush, snapping branches as it fled. Morena stumbled after them, calling her son's name in a voice that cracked with despair. Geralt's heart pounded, not from fear for himself, but for what was about to unfold. If the soldiers met the creature in its current state, blood would be spilled before he could intervene. He pushed harder, faster, weaving through the trees like a silver ghost, but the creature was swift, uncannily so, bounding ahead with bursts of unnatural speed. A shout erupted in the distance. "Men! Draw blades!" Steel sang. Torches flared. Geralt burst from the trees just as the first soldier saw the creature leap into the torchlight. The sergeant's voice thundered, "Kill it!" Steel flashed in the torchlight as the soldiers formed a hasty line, shields raised, blades gleaming with cold resolve. The creature skidded to a halt before them, its thin limbs trembling. For a moment it crouched low, cornered, frozen between instinct and terror. Then, as the torches flared brighter, its eyes yielded fully to panic. Geralt burst from the trees, boots thudding against the damp earth. "Hold!" he shouted, voice cutting through the chaos. "Do not strike!" But the sergeant, grizzled, battle-hardened, haunted by the loss of his men, did not heed the warning. "Loose formation. Surround it. Do not let it flee again." The soldiers advanced. The creature shrieked, a sound that made even the seasoned men flinch. In that single moment of hesitation, it hurled itself sideways, darting with unnatural swiftness. Its claws raked a shield, sparks flying. The soldier behind it staggered, face paling, as he realized how close death had come, and still the creature fled not toward an escape, but toward Morena, who stumbled into the clearing mere heartbeats later, breathless and wild-eyed. "Stop!" she cried, arms stretched out. "Do not harm him, please." Her voice only heightened the confusion. The soldiers turned, unsure whether to restrain her or press the attack. The creature gave a broken whine, recognizing her cry, or recognizing the memory that clung to it like a fading echo. Geralt reached the front line, shoving aside a soldier who attempted to block his path. "Stand down," he ordered, "all of you." The sergeant rounded on him. "The hells I will. That thing tore Kellen apart like butchered meat. I won't have it taking another man." "And you'll only provoke it further," Geralt replied coldly. "You want to avenge your fallen, I understand. But charging blindly will only worsen the bloodshed." The sergeant's jaw clenched. "You had your chance, Witcher. Now we finish this." Geralt drew his steel sword, not to attack, but to command authority. "You will not touch it," he said, voice lowered to a blade-edged whisper. "Not while I breathe." The soldiers wavered. A Witcher's reputation carried weight, yet the creature, shaking violently, began edging backward, its gaze fixed on Morena. She stepped forward, hands trembling, pleading silently for it to come to her. "Morena," Geralt warned, "stay where you are." "He needs me," she whispered, tears streaking her face. "He remembers my voice. Look at him, he's frightened." That was true, but fear in a cursed being was a blade pointed in all directions. The creature let out a stuttering cry and lurched toward her. Instantly, soldiers readied their spears. Geralt sprang between them and the creature, sword raised defensively. "Lower your weapons," he barked. "Witcher, move aside," the sergeant roared. "If we don't strike now, he'll kill her. Then let me handle it." "Handle it?" the sergeant spat. "We saw it lunge at her before. Are you blind?" Geralt did not answer. His focus remained locked on the creature. It had stopped halfway between him and Morena, limbs trembling, breath heaving as though it fought some invisible internal battle. The torchlight played across its skin, pale, stretched, weakened by hunger and grief. Strange marks marred its arms, faint sigils burned beneath the flesh, remnants of the necromantic ritual that had drawn its spirit back unwillingly. Morena took another step. "It's all right," she murmured. "You're safe now. Come to me. Please, my son." The creature's head jerked as though the word son struck some buried nerve. It reached out. Geralt saw the shift immediately, the dilation of its pupils, the tightening of its claws. It was not reaching for comfort. It was reaching for warmth, for life, for blood. Geralt moved faster than thought. He seized Morena's arm and pulled her sharply backward. She stumbled with a cry of pain, falling to her knees. The creature's claws slashed the empty air where her throat had been. The soldiers recoiled, startled. Geralt planted himself firmly between them. "Look at it, Morena. Truly look." The creature recoiled from its failed strike, shaking, confused. It emitted a keening moan as though mourning its own actions, its own fractured identity. But hunger gnawed at it from within, and hunger always won. Morena's voice broke. "No, it didn't mean—" "It did," Geralt said, "and it will again." The sergeant strode forward, spear raised. "Enough! Witcher or not, I won't let that thing harm another soul." Geralt's voice thundered with a force that silenced the clearing. "Back! Away!" For a moment the forest froze. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The creature hunched low, claws digging into the soil, breath ragged. The torchlight revealed small fissures along its skin, as if its body strained to contain something that should never have lived. It stared at Morena with a face twisted by longing and a deeper, darker craving. She whispered through tears, "My baby." The creature answered with a sound that no human throat could form. And then it lunged, not at Geralt, not at the soldiers, at Morena. Geralt swung the flat of his blade, striking it hard across the shoulder. The blow sent the creature tumbling, snarling, and shrieking in pain. It scrambled back, shaking its head, its movements wild. Morena crawled toward it instinctively. "He's hurt. Let me." Geralt seized her wrist. "Enough. If you approach him again, it will be your death." She tore free, sobbing. "I won't abandon him." Before Geralt could stop her, she stumbled to her feet and ran toward the creature. The soldiers shouted. Geralt lunged after her, but the creature moved first. Its claws swept upward, dragging across her shoulder and neck. Blood sprayed across the leaves. She collapsed instantly, eyes wide in shock, breath choking. "Morena!" Geralt roared. The creature froze. Its clawed hand trembled above her fallen form, as though it finally understood what it had done, or perhaps only sensed the fresh warmth of her steel met flesh. The creature shrieked, staggering back from Morena's body. It clutched its wounded side, stumbling into the shadows. But even wounded, it fled with unnatural speed, vanishing into the dark forest once more. The soldiers did not chase it. They were too stunned by what had unfolded. Geralt knelt beside Morena. Her breath came shallow, wet with blood. Her eyes searched the empty shadows, desperate, incoherent. Did I hold him?" she whispered. Geralt gently closed her eyes as her final breath slipped away. The clearing was silent. At last, the sergeant spoke, his voice low. "Witcher, what now?" Geralt rose slowly, his face carved from stone. "Now," he said, "I finish what began in those ruins." And somewhere deep in the forest, wounded and maddened by the death of the only voice it remembered, the creature cried out. The sound echoed through the trees like a soul torn in half. The hunt was no longer merely necessary. It was inevitable. Night deepened over the borderlands like a heavy cloak, smothering the last embers of dusk beneath its weight. The forest, already thick with shadow, grew darker still as Geralt walked in silence away from the clearing where Morena had drawn her final breath. Behind him, the soldiers whispered among themselves, unsure whether to follow or flee from the grim path the Witcher now pursued. None dared speak her name. None dared speak of the creature that had sought her life even while confused by love and hunger. The sergeant caught up to him at last, torch flickering. "Witcher," he said, voice low, "you should know. We'll not chase that thing. Not into these woods. Not after what happened." "I didn't ask you to," Geralt replied without turning. "But if it escapes, it won't." His tone held a certainty that chilled the sergeant more than the night air. "This ends tonight." He continued on, leaving the soldiers to gather their wounded pride and the broken remnants of their courage. In truth, they were relieved to let the Witcher go alone into the darkness. The forest swallowed him almost immediately. Torches behind him dimmed, then vanished entirely. He moved swiftly, his eyes cutting through the black, as though born to it. The creature's trail was easy to follow now, not because it became careless, but because it bled. Drops of dark fluid glistened faintly on roots and stones. Its movements had grown erratic. Where once it fled in straight lines of panic, now it stumbled, veering drunkenly between trees. Pain clouded its instincts. Rage sharpened them. Geralt pressed on. The wind shifted, carrying with it a sound that made him halt. A thin, broken wail, half beast, half child, echoing between the trunks. The creature cried, not as a hunter seeking prey, but as a lost thing, seeking the only memory it had ever clung to. Morena's name had been carved into its twisted soul, and now that name had vanished from the world. Something inside it strained, breaking piece by piece, tearing itself apart. Geralt's medallion trembled softly. The curse was reaching its peak. He followed the sound until he reached a glade untouched by human presence for decades. Moss coated the ground like an emerald shroud, silvered by moonlight. At its center, an uprooted tree lay sprawled across the earth, its roots clawing at the sky. Beneath its fallen trunk, hunched and trembling, was the creature. It rocked back and forth, keening softly. One hand pressed against the gash Geralt's blade had opened. The other clawed at the earth, as though it sought to burrow beneath it and vanish into the soil where no memories could find it. Geralt stepped into the clearing. The creature went still. Slowly, it lifted its head. Its pale eyes glistened with something twisted beyond recognition. Grief, perhaps. Rage, undeniably. But beneath both lay a hollow emptiness. The void left when a memory that had held a soul together was severed. There is no one left to answer your cry. The creature flinched, baring its teeth. Its breath came in short bursts, each one catching on a sound too broken to call a word. Her name is gone, Geralt said, and she cannot call yours. The creature whimpered, a sound like a dying wind through old reeds. It crawled closer, dragging its wounded side, not aggressively, not hunting, but lost. Utterly lost. Geralt tightened his grip on his sword. Listen to me, he said softly. Your suffering was never meant to be. You were pulled from the peace of death and bound to a body that cannot hold you. That pain you feel, that confusion, it will only grow. The creature stared at him, or through him. Its eyes became hollow mirrors reflecting nothing at all. There is only one way to end it, Geralt said. One way to free what remains of you. The creature recoiled, shaking its head violently. It understood. Whether from memory or instinct, it knew what the Witcher intended, and it rejected it. With a shriek that tore the silence apart, it hurled itself at him. Geralt was ready. Steel flashed as he sidestepped, striking the creature's arm with a controlled blow. It staggered, regained its footing, lunged again. Each movement was fueled by desperation, not malice, an animal trapped within its own breaking mind. Geralt did not aim to maim. Each strike was measured, intended to weaken, not prolong suffering. The creature fought wildly, but its strength waned with every heartbeat. Its claws slashed the air, striking sparks off Geralt's blade. Its teeth snapped inches from his throat, but the Witcher moved with the sure grace of long experience, turning, stepping back, striking only when necessary. A final blow sent the creature sprawling across the moss. It lay there, chest heaving, limbs trembling. The wounds it bore, Geralt's, the soldier's, its own, bled freely now. It lifted its head one last time, and for a brief, fleeting heartbeat, Geralt saw something human flicker across its twisted features. A child's face, a memory of fear, a plea for release. Geralt lowered his blade. Your suffering ends here. The creature did not flee. It did not snarl. It closed its eyes, shuddering once, as though bracing for a storm. Geralt struck swiftly, cleanly, offering the only mercy his trade allowed. The forest fell silent. A faint breeze stirred the moss, brushing over the small, still form. For a moment, the twisted shape flickered, shifting, unraveling, and Geralt glimpsed the faint outline of a child's spirit, rising like mist from cooling flesh. Not twisted, not cursed, peaceful. It lingered only an instant, then drifted away into the night. Geralt knelt, placing his hand briefly over the creature's chest. "Go in peace," he murmured. "You were given no chance in life. May you find one in death." He rose, wiping his blade against the grass before sheathing it. His shoulders carried the familiar, heavy weight of grim necessity, a burden he had borne countless times. And yet this one felt heavier. The forest seemed to exhale, as if acknowledging the passing of something that had never belonged. Behind him, a faint rustling emerged. The sergeant stepped into the glade, torchlight trembling in his grip. The other soldiers hovered at the edge of the trees, fear etched into their faces. "Is it done?" the sergeant asked quietly. Geralt nodded. "It's done." The sergeant lowered his gaze to the still form at Geralt's feet. "Was it truly a child once?" Geralt's voice was steady. "Yes." "And the mother?" "Her story has ended as well." Silence fell over the glade. The soldiers shifted uneasily, their earlier bravado gone, replaced by the somber recognition that they had stumbled into something deeper than a mere hunt. The sergeant cleared his throat. "Leave no trace for wolves or scavengers." Geralt looked toward the fallen creature, then toward the trees beyond where Morena's body lay. "They should be buried together." The sergeant nodded, understanding. "Aye, together then." As the torches flickered in the dark and the soldiers prepared their tools, Geralt stepped back, letting the night settle. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the forest's quiet seep into him. A chance is given only once. Tonight he had seen what happened when that chance was taken away, but the tale was not yet ended, for in the ruins of Castle Hroth, something remained unanswered, something that would not rest until Geralt returned. And he knew he must. Dawn crept gingerly across the treetops, its pale light filtering through the canopy in trembling strands. The forest, though still haunted by the night's grim end, began to stir with cautious life. Birds gave tentative calls, and a distant stag barked somewhere beyond the ridge. Yet beneath these ordinary sounds lingered a heaviness, an echo of the creature's final cry, and the weight of the mother who had died calling for a lost son. Geralt walked ahead of the soldiers as they carried Morena's body through the forest. The creature's remains, wrapped carefully in torn cloaks, followed behind. No man spoke. Even those hardened by war and loss kept their silence, for they had glimpsed something that shook their notions of monsters and victims alike. The sergeant trudged beside Geralt, helmet in hand, his expression drawn. "Witcher," he said at last, voice rough with unease. "I've seen horrors on the battlefield, bandits, drowners, wraiths, but this..." He shook his head. "This was different." Geralt did not slow. "Curses often are. What happens to them now, to their spirits?" Geralt's gaze remained fixed ahead. "They have found peace. That is more than they had in life." The sergeant fell silent again. Perhaps the soldiers behind him shifted uneasily, each bearing the memory of Morena's desperate attempt to reach the boy she had lost and the boy she had created in her grief. When they reached the edge of the village, the alderman Bram was waiting. His face went pale as linen when he saw the shrouded forms. "Gods, who are they?" "Morena of Hroth," Geralt said simply, "and her son." Gasps rippled through the villagers. Old fears stirred, sharpened by guilt long ignored. Bram removed his cap, bowing his head. We did not know she still lived." "She lived in pain," Geralt replied, "and died for it." The sergeant cleared his throat. "We'll dig the grave south of the village, away from the road." "No," Geralt said, stopping him. "They will rest at the castle. That is where their story began, and where it should end." Bram looked uncertain, but he did not argue. The soldiers exchanged glances, then slowly nodded. Together they turned back toward the path, the weight of their steps oddly reverent. The day warmed as they climbed the slope to Castle Hroth. The ruins cast long shadows, broken stone catching the sunlight in muted glints. Birds nested in the shattered windows, and vines spilled over the once proud battlements like emerald tears. Within these walls, Morena had begged the dead to answer her. Within these walls, her son had first awakened to the torment of life returned. Geralt knelt where the ritual had been performed. The sigils etched into the stone floor glowed faintly in memory alone, their true power extinguished with the creature's death. Yet a residue remained, a coldness in the air, a lingering sadness woven into the very stones. He brushed his fingertips across the runes, sensing the desperation etched into each harsh line. Morena had carved them in hope, not malice. But hope, when twisted by grief, could warp into something dark enough to pierce the veil between worlds. The sergeant approached quietly. "Tell us where." Geralt pointed to a space beneath the tallest arch, where sunlight fell in a gentle arc. There, the soldiers set to work. Their picks and shovels bit into earth long undisturbed. As soil flew, the sound echoed across the ruins, a rhythmic, somber cadence. Geralt remained nearby, watching the castle with wary eyes. This place held memories, but no malevolent spirits. Only sorrow that clung like dust. When the graves were ready, the soldiers lowered the shrouded forms into the earth. Morena was set beside her son, just as Geralt had asked. Bram and several villagers arrived then, drawn by duty or curiosity, offering quiet prayers spoken with trembling lips. Even those who once feared Morena now whispered blessings for the peace they hoped she would finally know. Bram stepped forward. "Witcher, what will become of this place now?" Geralt did not take his eyes from the graves. "Let it stand. People forget too easily. Some things aren't meant to vanish into silence." The earth was filled, the ground smoothed, and makeshift markers fashioned from fallen stone were placed over the graves. The villagers bowed their heads. The soldiers murmured a final prayer. The wind swept through the broken hall one last time, carrying away the last fragments of the tale the ruins had guarded for years. But Geralt did not leave, not yet. He remained kneeling before the graves long after the others retreated. The sun lowered, casting gold upon the stones. A soft breeze stirred his hair, brushing against him like a sigh. For a heartbeat, he wondered if it carried something more, some faint whisper of a soul freed at last. A leaf drifted from above and fell upon the grave. Geralt rose. Something still lingered in the ruins, a faint trace of magic, fading but not yet gone. He followed the sensation deeper into the keep, past the broken hearths and collapsed beams, into a small chamber where dust lay thick on the floor. A small wooden horse lay toppled in a corner, its paint chipped with age. A faded blanket remained tucked beneath a rotted cradle. Geralt crouched, brushing aside a layer of dust. Beneath it he found a small carving, a pendant shaped like a swallow, delicate, carefully made. Morena's work, perhaps, or the father's. He lifted it gently. A faint warmth lingered in the wood. Not magic, memory. A sigh escaped him. You held to this, he murmured, thinking of Morena. And it held you. He stood and slipped the carving into a fold of his cloak. Some fates deserved remembrance. As he left the castle, the walls no longer seemed to loom with sorrow. They were merely ruins now, quiet, emptied, ready to rest. Bram met him outside. Witcher, your pay. Geralt shook his head. Keep it, use it for the village, for the children. The alderman blinked in surprise, but Witcher, it was promised. Then promise it to someone who needs it more. He turned toward Roach, who waited patiently at the gate. The mare nickered softly as he approached. Geralt mounted smoothly, adjusting his cloak. The sergeant stepped forward. Where will you go? Geralt looked east toward the rising haze that signaled the distant road. Where the path leads. The soldiers saluted him. The villagers bowed, not out of fear, but out of gratitude mixed with a quiet mourning. Geralt nodded once, then nudged Roach forward. As they descended the slope, the wind carried faint whispers across the ruined walls, threads of a story that would fade with time but never fully disappear. A tale of a mother's love twisted by grief, a child dragged back from peace, and a witcher who bore the burden of ending what should never have begun. And though the world would soon move on, forgetting the sorrow of Castle Hroth, Geralt knew he would remember. For some stories, once carried, linger forever. He tightened his grip on the rein. The road stretched long and silent ahead of Geralt, winding through rolling hills silvered by dawn's first light. Though he had left Castle Hroth behind, its weight lingered in his thoughts like the aftertaste of bitter herbs. Roach moved steadily beneath him, ears flicking at the distant cries of crows circling above farmlands just waking to morning. War had touched these lands. The meadows were trampled, the fields sown with the scars of marching boots and abandoned fortifications. Smoke rose from the ruins of an outpost to the north, likely claimed by fire during one of the border skirmishes. Yet despite the tension, the countryside held a fragile calm, as if weary of conflict. Geralt rode in this quiet for hours before reaching a fork, where a wooden signpost leaned crookedly. One path led toward Vizima, the other toward a cluster of small villages near the Velen marshlands. The Witcher intended neither. He sought only to pass through unseen, letting time wash away the remnants of the sorrow that clung to him. But the world rarely allowed a Witcher such peace. Roach's ears pricked sharply. Geralt felt her stiffen beneath him, a heartbeat before he heard it. A scream carried faintly on the wind. Another followed, clearer now, edged with panic. A third abruptly cut short. Geralt bowed his head, exhaled a long breath, then turned Roach toward the source. "Let's see what waits," he muttered. They galloped across uneven ground toward a small valley where a modest hamlet lay. 4 cottages, a barn, a well, and a scattering of tools that marked a life of toil. Smoke curled from the chimneys, but something else stirred, something dark weaving between the houses. Roach halted on her own hooves, scraping the earth. Geralt dismounted, drawing steel. Easy. The scene ahead unfolded with grim clarity. 2 bodies lay beside the well, their blood darkening the soil. A third sprawled across a doorstep. The doors of several cottages hung from broken hinges, as though forced inward by a great strength. And in the center of the hamlet, crouched low beside the barn, a creature fed. Geralt tensed. Not the same abomination he had slain. This one was larger, its spine jutting through thin skin, its limbs long and powerful. Its face, pressed into the body of a man, was gaunt and drawn into unnatural angles, yet its movements were disturbingly familiar. The jerking shudder as it fed, the frantic clawing for flesh. A fledgling Algul, freshly transformed. But something made Geralt pause. The attack seemed recent, too recent, and the body language of the creature was not purely predatory. It twitched as if in pain, keening softly as it tore at the corpse, its claws scraping more bone than flesh. Geralt sheathed steel and drew silver instead. The Algul raised its head. Blood dripped from its jaw. Its eyes, pale, sunken, haunted, met his. For an instant the creature froze, and in that heartbeat Geralt saw something unexpected. Not rage, not hunger, fear. Then it shrieked and charged. Geralt rolled aside as it slashed past him, its claws gouging deep furrows through the soil. He rose swiftly, blade angled to deflect its next strike. The Algul whirled, spine bristling, lips peeling back over jagged teeth. It lunged again. Geralt met it head on, steel boots digging into the earth as he redirected its momentum. The creature stumbled, regained balance, then lashed out with renewed fury. Geralt countered each blow, careful not to overcommit. Alguls were unpredictable, especially fledglings that had not yet mastered their monstrous instincts. "Back down," he murmured, though he knew it could not understand. The beast circled him warily. Its chest heaved, and it let out a low, trembling moan, more pained than aggressive, a strange thing for an Algul. Geralt advanced cautiously. His medallion buzzed. Not violently. This creature was cursed by something not entirely natural. Before he could close the distance, a faint cry cut through the still air. A child's voice. Geralt's head snapped toward the sound. From behind a near-collapsed cart, a small boy of perhaps 7 years crouched, eyes wide in terror. His clothes were blood-stained, not his own, it seemed, and he trembled violently as he watched the Algul thrash and wail. The creature reacted instantly. It turned toward the child. Geralt moved. His silver blade flashed through sunlight as he intercepted the Algul mid-lunge. Steel met bone with a clatter. The creature reeled back, screeching in pain. But something else happened. The Algul's eyes flickered. Recognition? Remorse? Its claws shook as it reached toward the boy with a trembling gesture, almost pleading. The child whimpered, "Papa?" Geralt froze. Slowly, the creature lowered its arm. The trembling intensified. Its lips moved in a grotesque attempt at forming words. And then, in a voice that barely resembled speech at all, came a single strained whisper. "Run." The boy bolted toward Geralt, who stepped protectively between them. The creature staggered backward, gripping its head as if torn between urges. The curse racked its body, twisting the remnants of humanity into a torment no living soul should bear. It slammed its fist into the ground again and again, shrieking in anguish. Geralt's eyes narrowed. Not a normal Algul, a man transformed, perhaps by dark magic, perhaps by grief, perhaps by circumstances too cruel to endure. The child sobbed, clutching the Witcher's leg. "Help him, please." Geralt exhaled slowly. "Stay behind me." The creature rose unsteadily, its form shaking violently. Its pale eyes locked once more on the boy. not with hunger now, but with a desperate dying plea. Then its body contorted, and with a guttural roar, it charged. Geralt had no choice. His blade met the creature's chest. Silver. The Al-Ghul shuddered, breath rattling, and slumped forward onto the sword. Its clawed hand brushed the ground beside the child, fingers twitching. It exhaled once as though relieved. Then it lay still. The boy collapsed to his knees, tears streaming. He told me to hide, he whispered. Papa told me to run when the others changed. Geralt knelt beside him. There were more Al-Ghuls? The child nodded. But Papa, he turned last. He tried to stop them. He tried. Geralt's jaw tightened. A spreading curse, sudden and violent. Something had struck this hamlet like a storm, and if it lingered, the child himself might carry its seed. He wiped his blade clean. What happened here? He asked quietly. The boy sniffled, wiping his face. A man came, a soldier. He was hurt. We brought him inside, but then at night he got sick, and Papa tried to help. But then everyone started screaming. Geralt felt the stir of grim recognition, a plague of transformation, not natural, not accidental. Someone had unleashed it. He placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. You're safe now. Is Papa free? The child whispered. Yes, Geralt said softly. He is. The boy buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Geralt lifted him gently. Stay close, he murmured. The Witcher stood and surveyed the ruined hamlet. Another curse, another sorrow, and a trail leading somewhere dark. He tightened his grip on the boy's hand and whispered, This road just grew longer. Smoke drifted lazily above the ruined hamlet as Geralt led the grieving boy from the center of the devastation. Roach followed close behind, her ears flicking nervously. She knew too well the scent of death that lingered thick in the air. The child's small hand clung to the Witcher's glove, trembling with each step. He dared not look back at the place where his father's twisted form lay cooling beneath the morning sun. Geralt paused at the edge of the village. What is your name? Larrick, the child whispered, his voice cracked from weeping. Geralt nodded once. Larrick, listen to me carefully. More of those creatures may linger nearby. Stay by my side. Do not wander. Do you understand? Larrick wiped his face with the back of his sleeve. Yes. The Witcher studied him a moment longer. The curse had not touched him, or at least not yet. His breathing was steady, his skin unblemished, his eyes clear. Whatever sickness had swept through the hamlet had not taken the boy, though it had claimed nearly all others. Geralt stood. He scanned the village perimeter, his medallion faintly vibrating, not with the presence of monsters, but with the residue of dark magic, subtle but unmistakable. This was no ordinary plague, he murmured. He returned to the center of the hamlet, Larrick at his side, and began to examine the bodies. One by one he knelt, searching for the marks of transformation. The skin of each victim bore deep gray veins branching beneath the surface like frost spreading across a window. Their limbs had twisted violently, sinew warped, bones stretched in the early stages of Al-Ghul mutation. Yet all the victims had died before the transformation completed, save for Larrick's father. That alone told Geralt the truth. This curse didn't begin here, he said under his breath. It was brought here. Larrick stood beside a doorframe, hugging his arms around himself. Papa said the man who came was sick. He had wounds, and he smelled strange. He said he needed shelter. Geralt approached him. Where did you take him? To that house. Larrick pointed to a half-collapsed cottage, where the door hung crookedly. Geralt stepped inside. Dust motes drifted in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the broken roof. Splintered tables, overturned stools, and dark stains on the floor spoke of chaos. But amid the disarray, the Witcher found what he sought. A torn piece of gambeson Temerian. The sigil stitched onto it belonged to a border regiment, one that had been patrolling near Castle Roth before the creature's attacks. A soldier infected by something in the wild, a soldier who had wandered, wounded and delirious, into this hamlet. And death had followed. Geralt frowned. No ordinary ghoul bite caused such rapid, widespread mutation. Something else had tainted the wound, something older, darker, perhaps connected to the lingering magic he had sensed at Hroth, or perhaps another sorcerer's meddling. He scanned the cottage once more and found a trail of smeared footprints leading out the back, lighter than an adult's barefoot. He stiffened. "Larrick," he said quietly. "Did anyone else escape?" The boy shook his head. "No." Geralt crouched by the tracks. They were small, smaller than Larrick's. A child? But the stride was uneven, dragging. The toes clawed into the dirt. Geralt felt a cold knot twist in his stomach. One more victim had fled mid-transformation. He rose swiftly. "We cannot stay." Larrick's voice trembled. "Why? Isn't it over?" "No," Geralt said. "One escaped, and it may turn fully before nightfall." The realization drained the color from the boy's face. Where did it go? Geralt followed the tracks to the tree line. The prints grew erratic, stumbling deep into the forest. The cursed one likely fled in pain, confused and frightened, dangerous in its desperation. He tightened the straps on his gauntlets. "We'll track it, but first..." He knelt beside Larrick again. "Can you ride?" The boy swallowed hard. "I think so." Geralt lifted him onto Roach's saddle. The mare shifted gently, as if sensing the child's fear. Geralt placed Larrick's small hands on the reins. "You stay with her," he instructed. "She'll follow me. Speak to her softly. She'll understand." Larrick nodded, his face pale but determined. Geralt led them into the forest. The trail cut through thick undergrowth, broken ferns and disturbed earth. At times the footprints deepened sharply, as though the victim had fallen to its knees. At others the tracks spread into long strides, evidence of the curse surging unpredictably through their limbs. Geralt noted each sign with silent efficiency. His senses sharpened, ears attuned to the slightest rustle. The forest here grew dense and strangely quiet, as if nature itself held its breath. After several minutes, Roach halted suddenly. Geralt raised a hand. He heard it too. A faint whimper, then a sob. Human. Young. He stepped forward silently, hand on the hilt of his silver sword, and peered through a thicket. A child sat against a fallen log, a girl no older than Larrick. Dirt streaked her face, blood stained her tunic. Her knees were drawn to her chest as she rocked back and forth, sobbing softly. Larrick gasped, "Elsa!" The girl lifted her head sharply. Her eyes were red with crying, but clear, human, not yet twisted by the curse. Relief flickered across her face as she saw Larrick. "Larrick!" she cried. He slipped down from Roach and ran to her. The two embraced tightly, clinging to each other in the shadow of two tragedies. One survived, one narrowly escaped. Geralt approached slowly. "Elsa," he said gently, "were you bitten? Scratched?" She shook her head violently. "No, I hid when I saw the others changing. Mama told me to run. I ran into the forest and waited. I didn't know if anyone else made it." Geralt studied her carefully. No signs of infection, no discoloration, no trembling beneath the skin. She appeared unharmed, but the tracks... He looked past her and saw them. Footprints deeper, larger than before, leading away from her hiding place. The cursed child had stopped here, and then continued east. Geralt's voice dropped. "Elsa, did someone come here before us?" She hesitated. Fear flickered in her eyes. "Yes. A boy. But not Larrick. He was hurt. He asked for help, but
His face looked wrong and he cried like he was hurting." Geralt rested a hand on her shoulder. "You did well to run." Elsa's small frame shook. "Is he still turning?" "Likely," Geralt said, "but not for long. I'll handle it." He turned to Larrick. "Take her. Stay by Roach." Larrick nodded, helping Elsa climb into the saddle. The mare nudged them gently, protective and steady. Geralt followed the tracks eastward, alone now. The forest grew darker, the air colder. A faint stench, rot mingled with fear, hung beneath the branches. He found the creature minutes later. It knelt by a shallow creek, screaming into the water as though trying to drown its own reflection. Its limbs twisted unnaturally, its jaw unhinged, teeth lengthening. The curse had nearly completed. It turned, saw him, and rushed. Its cry shook the trees. Geralt readied his blade, knowing there was no saving this one, but as it leapt, another scent struck him. Familiar. Wrong. The wound on its chest, festering, glowing faintly beneath torn flesh, was marked with a sigil, a brand of magic. Someone had done this. Someone had planned it. Geralt struck. The creature fell. The forest exhaled. And the Witcher whispered grimly, "This curse didn't start with Castle Hroth after all." The shallow creek gurgled softly as the creature's lifeless body settled against the stones, its twisted limbs slowly relaxing in death's release. Geralt remained still for several breaths, silver blade lowered but not yet sheathed, his eyes narrowing at the faintly glowing sigil carved into the corpse's ruined chest. The symbol's lines intertwined like tangled roots, etched with a precision no frenzied ghoul or desperate villager could muster. This was deliberate work, witchcraft, or something darker. Geralt knelt beside the creature, touching the sigil lightly with a gloved finger. Even dead, it radiated a feeble buzz of corrupted magic. Within its spiral pattern, streaks of dried blood trapped the moon's reflection. No curse of natural origin carried such markings. Someone had branded this poor soul, marked him with intent. He closed the boy's eyes before rising. His medallion vibrated faintly, telling him the spell's residue still lingered in the clearing. Whatever sorcerer had unleashed this plague had left traces behind, subtle, nearly lost on the wind, but present. Geralt followed the faint magical trail deeper into the forest. Behind him, Roach and the children waited at the edge of the glade. Larrick watched silently, hands gripping the reins too tightly. Elsa clung to the saddle, her small face pale beneath tear-streaked dirt. Both remained silent, sensing something vast and cruel stirring beneath the surface of their small, shattered world. Geralt did not lead them far. He needed only enough distance to confirm what his instincts already whispered. And it didn't take long. A few steps beyond the creek, beneath a low-hanging cluster of branches, he found a fragment of cloth, dark green, embroidered with thin silver thread. A sorcerer's cloak hem, but not torn by panic or flight, cut deliberately, as if marking a path. Geralt knelt and lifted the scrap, rubbing it between his fingers. Expensive fabric, finely woven, a noble sorcerer perhaps, or a mage in hiding. He recalled Morena's ritual, sloppy yet driven by genuine grief. This was different. This was calculated.
The sigil matching the boy's chest hinted at careful preparation. Someone was experimenting on humans. The thought tightened the Witcher's jaw. He returned to the children. Larrick raised frightened eyes. Is it over now? For this village, yes, Geralt said, but not for others unless I stop the one responsible. Elsa's voice was a thin whisper. Who would do such a thing? Geralt mounted Roach. Someone who values results over lives. He glanced once more at the direction where the magical trail led. A faint ripple in the air, a taste of something sharp on the wind. Eastward, toward the abandoned watchtower of Cravorn. Old soldiers' tales returned to him. Cravorn, a crumbling relic once used by renegade mages during Temeria's early years. Rumor claimed tunnels beneath the tower still held remnants of their experiments. The place had been left untouched, feared by locals. The perfect hiding place. Geralt guided Roach forward, children held securely behind him. The sun dipped lower, reddening the sky like spilled blood. As they traveled, the path narrowed, winding through hills, where thorn bushes clawed at the earth like skeletal fingers. Larrick spoke again, voice trembling. Witcher, will the ones who did this come here? For us? Geralt's reply was simple. Not while I'm with you. But the truth gnawed at him. If the plague was spreading by design, the children were walking evidence, and sorcerers who trafficked in such forbidden arts did not leave evidence behind. At last the watchtower emerged on a hilltop, a jagged silhouette against the bruised sky. Stones had fallen from its sides, leaving gaping holes like missing teeth. Vines crawled over its foundations, half choking what remained of its walls. A cold wind circled the structure, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of old magic. Elsa shivered. I don't like that place. Neither do I, Larrick whispered. Geralt dismounted and stood between them and the tower. Stay close. Do not stray from Roach. Roach herself stamped uneasily, ears pinned back. Geralt gave her a reassuring pat before moving toward the tower's entrance. The great door had rotted through long ago, leaving only a splintered frame. Inside, darkness pooled like sluggish water, heavy and stagnant. Geralt's medallion thrummed, magic within, old, but recently disturbed. Shattered stone lay scattered across the floor like bones. The spiral staircase along the left wall had collapsed halfway up, its remnants dangling like broken ribs. Tattered banners hung limply from rusted hooks, bearing symbols faded almost to nothing. But the smell, that same metallic tang, mixed with sulfur and the sour scent of decay. Geralt knew it well. Necromancy. He descended deeper, following the current of magic that tugged at his senses. Behind the ruined hearth, concealed by a veil of ivy and loose stones, he found a narrow passage leading underground. The bricks here were marked with sigils, old ones, meant to keep the curious from descending. They had failed. The air grew colder. As he followed the twisting stairwell downward, wisps of torchlight drifted from below, flickering against the walls like dying spirits. When he reached the final step, the corridor opened into a vast underground chamber, and there he saw it. A laboratory, tables cluttered with jars of reagents, vials filled with viscous fluids, ancient tomes splayed open beside diagrams of human anatomy. A cauldron simmered over a fire pit, emitting greenish vapor. Chains hung from the ceiling, some empty, some stained with old blood, and in the center stood a man in a long green cloak, his back turned. He hummed softly to himself as he worked, quills scratching across parchment. His movements were measured, meticulous. When he at last paused and turned around, Geralt saw a thin face framed by dark hair streaked with silver. His eyes glowed faintly with power. Not a renegade mage, a member of the Brotherhood. Geralt of Rivia, the sorcerer said with a small, polite bow. I have been expecting you. Geralt's hand tightened on his sword. Not many expect me and live, the sorcerer smiled faintly. Oh, I believe we will both leave this meeting alive. I bear you no ill will. In fact, your timing is You were the one who cursed those villagers? Cursed? The man laughed softly. No, Witcher. I liberated them. By turning them into monsters. By unlocking their dormant potential, the sorcerer corrected gently, as though explaining an equation to a stubborn student. Humanity is fragile, weak, limited, but with certain adjustments, guided by the proper intellect, new possibilities arise. Geralt stepped forward. What adjustment did you give them? The sorcerer raised a vial, swirling its shimmering contents, a refined form of the ghoul's regenerative essence, stabilized, controlled, or so I believed. His smile faltered slightly. The first batch unraveled prematurely. You killed them? I improved them, he insisted. Pain is the cost of progress, Witcher. Surely you understand your kind was born of similar ambition. Geralt's gaze hardened. We were created to protect humans, not butcher them. The sorcerer waved a hand dismissively. Old ideals? Outdated? Evolution demands sacrifice. And you, Geralt? You just eliminated my latest test subjects. Geralt's sword slid free with a whisper of steel. Then I suppose, the Witcher said quietly, you'll soon have to answer for that loss. The sorcerer lifted both hands, arcane sigils sparking to life around him. I was hoping, he murmured, you would say that. The chamber shook as two forces met, sorcery and silver, ambition and duty, and Geralt understood, with grim clarity, that the true plague had only begun to show its face. The chamber thrummed with the crackle of rising magic. Pale green sigils spiraled around the sorcerer's hands, swirling with predatory grace like serpents unfurling in torchlight. Geralt advanced, steel blade reflecting the sickly glow, his stance measured, his breath steady. The air tightened as though the room itself braced for the storm about to break. With a swift gesture, a blast of kinetic force surged toward the Witcher, rippling the air like heated glass. Geralt sprang aside, the shock wave splintering the stone pillar where he had stood moments before. Debris rained across the chamber floor, clattering against the alchemical jars and brass instruments crowding the sorcerer's workspace. You've improved since last we met, the sorcerer said conversationally, reshaping sigils with languid precision. Your reflexes are sharper. Your step more decisive. Kaer Morhen's training persists, I see. Geralt narrowed his eyes. We've never met. The sorcerer smiled thinly. True, but I have read enough of Witcher physiology to feel as though we've spoken at length. Another spell flared, a chain of violet lightning arcing toward Geralt like a serpent seeking a throat. Geralt rolled beneath it, the charge slashing a deep scar across the stone wall as it passed. Rising to his feet, he hurled a Yrden sign onto the ground. Runes flashed beneath his boots, spreading in a wide ring of shimmering violet. The sorcerer stepped into the circle and froze for a heartbeat as the slowing effect tugged at his limbs. Geralt struck. Steel clashed against a hastily summoned magical shield, sparks flying as the blade skidded across its surface. The sorcerer grimaced, leaning into the barrier. Clever, he murmured, but insufficient. He clenched his fist. The Urden circle shattered in a burst of scattered runes. A second force slammed into Geralt's ribs like a battering ram, hurling him backward across a table filled with vials. Glass exploded around him in a cascade of green and crimson, sizzling where it touched the stone. Geralt landed hard, boots scraping as he regained balance. The sorcerer approached calmly, as though strolling through a garden. "You should leave, Witcher. Truly. You have undone much of my work already. Spare yourself the humiliation of failure." Geralt wiped a smear of glowing
Your work cost entire families their lives. Lives, the sorcerer said softly, almost wistfully. Such fragile threads. But imagine, just imagine, what humanity could become if we embraced transformation instead of fearing it. By becoming ghouls? Ghouls, the sorcerer replied, are merely the first rung on a magnificent ladder. He lifted a vial from the table, its contents swirling with a shimmering black mist. This formula, the one your Witcher blade so rudely interrupted its testing, would have allowed even elders to heal wounds in moments, to resist disease, to become stronger, faster. Geralt's expression darkened. And what of the mind, the soul, the humanity lost in the process? The sorcerer shrugged lightly. A small price. Geralt's voice lowered, for others to pay. The sorcerer's eyes glinted. Ideally? Geralt hurled a Quen sign across his chest, just as the sorcerer loosed another spell, a roaring column of flame that engulfed the left side of the chamber. Quen held, shimmering against the inferno, but the force behind the spell pushed Geralt to one knee. Heat washed over him, searing the air. He lunged sideways as the flames vanished, rolling behind a crumbling pillar. The sorcerer's laughter echoed through the chamber, soft and patronizing. "You fight well," he said, "but you are still only a mutation, a tool forged for killing beasts. And I," he spread his arms, "am forging the future." Geralt stepped from behind the pillar and threw out his hand. Ard! A wave of compressed force struck the sorcerer full in the chest, sending him staggering 3 steps backward. His magical barrier flickered, his concentration wavered. Geralt seized the moment. He closed the distance in a surge of motion, blade slicing upward. The sorcerer reacted too slowly. Geralt's steel tore through his outer cloak and left a deep gash across his shoulder. The sorcerer cried out, not in pain, but in fury. "You dare harm?" He struck again, this time forcing the sorcerer to teleport several paces away in a crackle of blue light. The man reappeared near the laboratory's far wall, clutching his wounded shoulder, blood staining his robes. His eyes burned. "Very well, Witcher," he hissed. "If you insist on being an obstacle, then you shall be a demonstration." He snapped his fingers. Chains rattled. Geralt spun toward the sound. In the shadows behind him, 2 figures stirred, twisted, hunched, crawling on all fours. Their bodies were half-formed, caught in the agonizing transition between human and ghoul. Their eyes glowed faintly with the same branded sigil he had seen on the boy. Fresh experiments. Geralt stepped back, blade raised. "You're using living prisoners now." "Prisoners, no." The sorcerer chuckled darkly. "Volunteers. They believe they would become stronger men, and they will, briefly, before your blade ends them." The first abomination lunged. Geralt swung in a clean arc, silver flashing. The creature's head rolled across the chamber floor, its body collapsing in a shudder. The second charged with startling speed, claws tearing gouges across the floor. Geralt met its leap with a downward strike, cutting deep into its spine. It shrieked,
stumbling, but managed to lash his arm with a wild swipe. Blood blossomed along Geralt's sleeve. He finished it with a quick, merciful thrust. When the chamber grew silent again, Geralt turned, only to find the sorcerer no longer smiling. The wound on the man's shoulder pulsed with an eerie glow. His breathing deepened, his fingers twisted. The sigil within the gash flared bright. Geralt realized with a jolt he had used his own mutagen. The sorcerer's voice trembled with exhilaration, not fear. "At last," he whispered, "my masterpiece takes hold." His veins blackened, his teeth lengthened, his body convulsed. Geralt cursed under his breath. "You fool." The sorcerer lifted his head. "I observe, Witcher, perfection." His transformation completed in a violent shudder. No longer man, not fully ghoul, something worse. He leapt. Geralt barely raised his blade in time. The true battle had begun. The transformed sorcerer struck with the ferocity of a starving fiend. His limbs, lengthened and hardened by the mutagen's twisted embrace, crashed against Geralt's blade with bone-rattling force. Sparks burst upon impact, scattering across the stone floor like fleeting embers of a dying forge. Geralt steadied himself, absorbing the shock with practiced balance. His eyes narrowed, tracking every unnatural twitch, every spasming ripple beneath the creature's skin. What had been a man, calculating, arrogant, brilliant, was now a grotesque fusion of sinew and sorcery, his twisted form bearing the jagged elegance of a nightmare sculpted by ambition. The creature lunged again. Geralt slid sideways, letting the fiend's claws scrape harmlessly across the stone. The Witcher retaliated with a swift, upward strike, cutting a deep line across the beast's ribcage. Dark ichor spilled forth, sizzling where it touched the floor. The transformed sorcerer howled, half rage, half triumph. "You see?" the creature gurgled, voice warping into a broken blend of human speech and guttural snarls. "Strength. Beyond Witchers, beyond anything." Geralt drove his boot into its knee, forcing the creature to the ground. "Beyond sanity," he growled. The monster thrashed, tail-like tendrils sprouting along its spine. They writhed violently, flinging splinters of bone in every direction. Geralt ducked behind an overturned table, his coat sliced by a shard that would have pierced a lesser man's throat. The creature surged forward, overturning the table in a single swipe. Its breath steamed in putrid clouds, its eyes gleaming with malevolent intelligence beneath the frenzy. Geralt cast Igni, a burst of flame. The creature recoiled with a shriek as fire enveloped its shoulder and flank, charring flesh in sizzling patterns. It writhed, slamming its body into the wall to extinguish the flames, sending cracks spidering through the stone. But the sorcerer, what was left of him, only grew more frenzied, emboldened by his own suffering. Pain no longer deterred him. Pain fed him. Geralt exhaled sharply. Mutations induced by corrupt magic were notoriously unstable. The creature's strength would peak quickly and collapse just as swiftly, but if it reached that apex before Geralt ended it, the chamber would become a tomb. The monster leapt. Geralt braced, raising Quen just as the fiend's claws hammered against his chest. The protective shield flared, cracking under the force, but held long enough for Geralt to twist beneath the blow and roll to safety. The beast landed awkwardly, its weight collapsing part of the laboratory's central dais. Ancient tomes and glass vials shattered beneath it. A cloud of shimmering alchemical dust billowed into the air, swirling in iridescent haze. Geralt shielded his face. The dust weakened the senses. He could feel it gnawing faintly at his lungs, begging entry. The monster breathed it in fully and convulsed, its movements more erratic now, muscles spasming uncontrollably as the mutagen mingled with the volatile reagents. Good. That instability would be the Witcher's advantage. Geralt cast Yrden again, spreading runes across the stone in a wide circle. Their glow pulsed like a heartbeat. The creature staggered into the trap, slowed, as though thickened air clutched at its limbs. Geralt advanced. His sword shimmered in the torchlight as he brought it down in a heavy, practiced arc. The blow sliced through the beast's forearm, severing it at the elbow. The creature's scream shook dust from the rafters, but Geralt pressed forward, momentum carrying his blade into a second strike that carved deep. The beast reeled backward, crashing into the far wall, but even now it did not fall. From its severed arm, tendrils of sinew lashed out, seeking reattachment. They wriggled blindly, dragging the ruined limb toward the body. Geralt slashed them apart with swift strokes, severing regeneration before it could begin. The fiend roared in fury. "You meddle! In evolution!" it snarled, its voice cracking, reforming, collapsing. Geralt's response was cold. Evolution doesn't involve murdering villagers. The creature leapt once more, forcing Geralt to dive aside. Its claws tore gouges along the floor, slicing through the Yrden circle and disrupting the runes. The slowing field flickered and died. Geralt scrambled to his feet, only for the creature to tackle him. He crashed onto his back, steel jarred from his grip. The monster pinned him with crushing strength, its jaw opening wide, fangs dripping corrupted saliva. Geralt punched upward, striking its throat. The blow slowed it, but did not stop it. The creature lowered its head and froze. Its eyes widened. Geralt followed its gaze. Behind them, on a small ledge above the alcove entrance, two tiny figures watched. Laric and Elsa trembling, their faces pale as moonlight. Geralt's blood chilled. "No!" he barked, but the creature was already turning. Not toward Geralt, toward the children. It lunged. Geralt threw himself forward, snatching a fallen dagger. He hurled it with all his strength. Steel spun through the air, sinking deep into the beast's lower spine. The fiend collapsed mid-leap, skidding across the stone. It writhed, howling, its claws scraping gouges into the floor as it struggled to rise. Geralt sprinted, grabbing his silver sword as he passed. The children pressed themselves against the wall, eyes wide with terror. "Stay there," he commanded. "Do not move." The monster rose to its knees, trembling violently. Its flesh bubbled, mutated. The mutagen was failing, unable to sustain the grotesque form any longer. Its stolen strength waned. Geralt approached, blade raised. The creature lifted its ruined face, voice rasping with fading breath. "You do not understand what I could have been." Geralt's voice was stone. "I understand exactly what you became." He struck cleanly. The fiend's body went still. For several seconds, nothing moved in the chamber. The torches flickered. The dust slowly settled. The monstrous form before Geralt shuddered once, collapsing inward as the mutagen dissolved. In a matter of breaths, the creature regressed, first to a twisted husk, then to the wasted hollow shape of the sorcerer he had once been. Human again, but only in form. Geralt wiped his blade and sheathed it. It was over. He turned to the children. Elsa wept silently, clinging to Laric's arm. The boy held her close, staring at the fallen sorcerer with hollow disbelief. Geralt knelt before them. "It's finished. You're safe now." Lorik swallowed hard. Witcher, will more like him come? Geralt looked toward the fallen body, toward the cursed runes carved into the stone, toward the notes still scattered across the sorcerer's workbench, pages filled with diagrams, formulas, and names of villages, dozens of them. His voice darkened. No, he said, I'll see to that personally. Elsa wiped her tears. What happens now? Geralt rose slowly. Now we bury the dead, and then I take you somewhere safe. He lifted them gently, guiding them toward the stairway. But as he ascended, his eyes drifted back once more to the sorcerer's fallen form, and to the faint glimmer of runes still glowing beneath the floor. This was no lone madman. This was the echo of something larger, something awakening, and the Witcher knew his path was far from ended. Geralt guided the children up the winding stairway. The forest beyond the tower was hushed, holding its breath after the storm of sorcery that had raged below. Lyric and Elsa clung to him, as though the shadows themselves might reach out and swallow them. Roach waited at the foot of the hill, her posture taut, sensing the lingering taint clinging to the stones of Cravorn. Geralt lifted Elsa into the saddle first, then Lyric. Both held tightly to the worn leather, leaning into Roach's familiar warmth. Only once they seemed steady did Geralt place a calming hand upon the mare's neck. Easy, girl, he murmured. We're leaving. Roach snorted softly, relieved. Geralt glanced back at the watchtower, its jagged silhouette standing like a broken tooth against the reddening sky. Smoke drifted lazily from one of its shattered windows, the final exhalation of the sorcerer's failed ambitions. But the true threat did not lie in the tower's crumbling stones. It lay in the knowledge stored below, in the twisted formulas and cruel designs resting upon that laboratory's tables. And Geralt knew this knowledge could not remain. With the children safely mounted, he entered the tower once more, descending into the laboratory a final time. The remains of the sorcerer lay collapsed against the far wall, reverted to a husk, pale, human, and pathetically fragile. The arrogance that had filled his voice now seeped into the cold stone, hollow and forgotten. Geralt swept the laboratory with a Witcher's knowing eye. The schematics for mutation, the vials of volatile mutagens, the branded sigils and dusty tomes, all of it whispered danger beyond one man's madness. It hinted at a network, a shared pursuit, a philosophy born not from grief as Morena's had been, but from ambition, sharpened like a blade. And blades, when left unattended, are always found by the wrong hands. Geralt drew a torch from the wall, struck flint, and ignited the oil-soaked rag. Flames blossomed hungrily. Fire raced across the brittle manuscripts with startling ease, devouring ink and parchment until they curled inward like dying leaves. The blaze spread quickly, climbing shelves, licking up dried herbs and reagents. Glass vials burst one after another, adding purple and blue flares to the growing inferno. Geralt's medallion trembled. Magic died with a hiss, drowned beneath the blaze. He left the torch where it fell and strode back toward the stairwell. The fire roared in his wake, rising like a final rebuke to the sorcerer's hubris. As Geralt emerged into the cool air above, smoke billowed from the tower's windows in thick black columns. Birds fled from the treetops, startled by the sudden fury. Lyric stared at the tower, eyes wide. Witcher, is it safe now? Geralt nodded. No one will use that place again. Elsa shivered and leaned into Lyric. I heard him screaming, she whispered. The sorcerer. When he changed, Geralt placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. You hear no more screams from him. He won't return. His magic is gone. The children's breathing steadied. Roach pawed at the ground, eager to leave the cursed hill behind. Geralt mounted the mare, settling behind the children to keep them steady. Hold on, he said softly. They rode from Cravorn as the tower burned. Flames climbed its ancient stones, licking skyward, sending sparks drifting into the evening breeze. By the time they reached the base of the valley, the structure looked less like a tower and more like a dying star, its glow fierce, furious, and fading. The road ahead stretched long and quiet. Larrick spoke first, voice trembling. Where will we go now? Geralt considered the question. The world was vast, but safe harbors were few, especially for children who had witnessed such horrors. He thought of the temple of Melitele in Elander, where kind-hearted priestesses. He thought of Nenika's stern wisdom, her calm presence, her refusal to let darkness swallow those who sought her protection. We ride to Elander, Geralt said. There's a temple there that will take you in. Elsa blinked. A temple? A safe one, Geralt assured her. It will shelter you, teach you, feed you, and no sorcerer will ever harm you again. Larrick glanced back at the burning tower. But what if there are more like him? More who want to turn people into monsters? There might be, Geralt said truthfully. But their path ends like his. The boy swallowed hard. Because of witchers? Geralt raised his gaze to the setting sun. Because someone must judge what should never have been made. The Witcher rarely spoke of destiny, nor of duty beyond contracts. Yet some burdens, though unasked for, found their way into his hands. And the twisted magic he had uncovered here was not a singular madness. It bore the mark of a growing hunger within the hearts of too many scholars, those who believed power could justify any atrocity. Geralt tightened his hold on the reins. The path downward wound through thick woodland, shadowed by tall oaks. Evening crickets began their song. Fireflies emerged, flickering timidly. As they traveled, Larrick leaned against Elsa, and she rested her head upon his shoulder. Two children bound now by shared grief and fragile hope. Geralt kept his senses open, scanning the trees for signs of danger. Yet for a time the forest offered no threat. Only the gentle murmur of leaves, the rhythmic steps of roach, and the soft breaths of the tired children. Stars emerged overhead as darkness settled in full. Geralt guided Roach toward a clearing sheltered by boulders where a small fire could be made without attracting unwanted attention. He dismounted carefully, lifting the children down from the saddle. We'll rest here tonight, he said. Tomorrow we ride for Elander. Elsa curled beside the fire. Larrick remained awake longer, poking the embers with a stick. Finally he whispered, Witcher? Why do people make monsters? Geralt looked up at the night sky, where a scattering of stars shimmered like distant lanterns, guiding lost souls. People make monsters, he said quietly, when they forget what it means to be human. Larrick considered this in silence, then lay beside Elsa, sleep dragging his eyelids down. Geralt sat watch long into the night. The forest breathed around him. The fire crackled softly. The burning tower's glow, once fierce, faded entirely beyond the hills. But the Witcher did not relax. He knew that somewhere, in the shadows of kingdoms fractured by war, another mind nurtured dreams like the fallen sorcerer's. Ambition such as his never died in one place alone. Still, for now, 2 children slept safe under his watch, and that was enough. As dawn approached, Geralt rose, casting one last glance at the path they had traveled. The world lay restless before him, riddled with griefs and horrors that would never truly be tamed. Yet he mounted Roach with calm resolve, for where such shadows gathered, the path awaited.